The sheriff's hand seized her arm with a grip like iron, pulling her roughly from the dim warmth of the saloon into the cold, unforgiving night. His voice was a low growl, thick with menace and whiskey. "You think you can wander free in this town, girl? Ain't nothing here for wild ones like you." Her breath hitched. She looked up at him, eyes sharp and unyielding, spit flicking from her mouth, landing hard against his cheek. The sting was immediate, his jaw tightening as his fist swung forward, slow and certain. Before the blow could fall, a rough hand grabbed the sheriff's wrist, twisting it back with quiet strength. The man who stepped between them was silent, wearing a coat faded to dust, boots caked with earth. His eyes were calm, steady, like a well that never ran dry. "Ain't your business," the sheriff snarled, trying to wrench free. "It is now," the quiet man said, voice low, steady as the earth beneath them. The girl spat again, the taste of blood and dirt bitter in her mouth. "Don't touch me." Her words were sharp, edged with desperation and defiance. Tension thickened the air. The street was empty, save for the flicker of a distant lantern. From behind cracked shutters and cracked doors, watchful eyes peeked out, but no one stepped closer. No one dared to cross the sheriff or the quiet man who stood his ground. "You think you can take her?" The sheriff's voice was rough, laced with warning. "She's coming," the quiet man said. "No one's taking her anywhere she doesn't want to go." The girl wrenched her arm, trying to break free, but the sheriff's grip tightened like a vice. "You don't know what she is," the sheriff hissed. "Blood like hers doesn't wash clean. Family curses follow. Wild girls bring nothing but trouble." "I'm not afraid of your curses," she snapped. "Or your kind." The quiet man stepped forward, body blocking the sheriff's path. "Not here, not tonight." The sheriff's eyes flickered with something dark, anger, fear, or both. "You're playing with fire, stranger." "So are you," the quiet man said, voice steady as a winter's wind. The sheriff spat on the ground and muttered something low, words swallowed by the cold. Then he turned, boots scraping the gravel as he stalked back toward town, his shadow swallowed by the night. The girl stumbled but kept her balance. Her gaze flicked to the quiet man, hatred burning in her eyes. "You saved me," she said, voice rough. "Don't expect thanks." He said nothing, only reached into his pocket and pulled out a coil of rough hemp rope. His hands were steady as he knelt, tying the rope around her wrist with practiced ease. The hemp bit into her skin, coarse and unyielding. She tried to pull away, snatching at the knot, but he held firm. "Don't think this means I'm yours," she said, voice trembling. "It means I'm keeping you alive," he said, standing. "That's enough for now." Her breath came quickly, chest rising and falling in the cold air. The rope tugged her arm tight, unyielding as the law that bent these hills. "You think this rope will hold me? You don't know what I'm made of." He shifted his weight, settled into the saddle of his horse. "Maybe not, but it'll hold long enough." She glared at him, lips tight. "I don't belong to you. I don't belong anywhere." "Maybe not yet," he said, "but I'm taking you somewhere safe, for now." The rope tugged again as he lifted her hand, tethering it to the saddle horn. The girl's jaw clenched, eyes hard and defiant. She looked back toward the saloon's flickering windows, toward the faces hiding behind shutters, and the town that had turned its back. "They don't want me," she said, voice low and bitter. "Neither do you." "I don't have to want you," he said, voice rough but steady. "I just have to keep you breathing." Her lips twitched in a bitter smile. "You're coming with me," he said again. She laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think I'd follow, like that's your choice." He tugged gently on the rope, reminding her it was no choice at all. "It is." The horse shifted beneath him, hooves crunching on loose gravel. The quiet man swung into the saddle, dust swirling around his boots. The girl's fists clenched, but the rope held. Her eyes locked on the horizon, cold stars glittering above the jagged ridge. Behind them, the town swallowed its silence. No cheers, no cries, only the cold breath of the night. The man's coat fluttered, a shadow against the dark. The girl's laugh echoed, sharp and defiant, piercing the quiet, like a challenge thrown to the wind. The sheriff's words echoed faintly behind them, a curse carried on the dry wind. "Wild girls don't last long." She spit again, head high. "I'll outlast them all." The man's eyes never left the road ahead. Then we'll ride until the end. She swallowed hard, the weight of the rope a tether to a future she didn't want. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't fight the pull. The night stretched on, cold and watchful. The quiet man's horse moved steadily, shadows fading behind them. The girl's laugh, a weapon and a warning, traveled far into the darkness. No one said a word. The only sound was the steady rhythm of hooves and the crackle of dry leaves underfoot. She swung at him, fist cutting through empty air. Breath hitched, lungs burning, she stumbled forward, chest heaving. His hand caught her wrist just before it could land, strong and unyielding. The rope was thick and rough against her skin, not cruel but firm, coiling around her wrist like a binding promise she didn't ask for. "Let me go," she spat, voice raw and low. He didn't say a word. His eyes stayed steady on hers, unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. She spat curses instead, sharp as knives, words thrown like stones. He let them fall into the cold air, unmoved. "You think you can break me?" she asked, voice bitter and sharp. "No," he said simply. "I just think you'll live longer this way." The rope tugged tighter as he tied the last knot. She tried to yank free, twisting her wrist hard, but the hemp held. He caught her hand mid-move, his grip steady, unshakable. "Stop," he said, voice low. "This isn't a prison. It's a lifeline." She pulled harder, but her strength was spent. Her eyes flashed with anger, frustration, and something deeper, a flicker of fear she wouldn't admit. They mounted their horses, moving through the empty streets of the town. The night swallowed their hooves and the sound of leather against wood. Whispers followed them from shadowed doorways and shuttered windows. Watchful eyes flickered out, but no one stepped forward. "People talk," she muttered, voice tense. "Whispers like knives." "They always do," he said. She glanced down at the rope, the rough fibers digging into her skin. "You're tying me up like I'm a beast. Better a beast on a rope than a ghost in the dust." Her jaw clenched. "You don't understand what it's like, being hunted, hated, the way they watch, waiting for you to slip." He nodded, slow and deliberate. "I know." The horses moved in rhythm, hooves beating a steady pulse on the dirt road. She shifted uncomfortably, the rope a constant reminder of her captivity. Yet, with each mile, the danger behind them grew quieter, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, a figure stood half hidden in the shadows, watching their departure with cold eyes. The man's coat fluttered like a ghost's as they passed. Neither of them noticed. She tried once more, slipping a finger under the knot. His hand was there in an instant, catching hers with quiet force. "Don't," he warned. "Not yet." She pulled her hand away, breathing hard, fury, and something close to despair in her eyes. "You're making enemies you don't even see," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He said nothing. The night held its silence as they rode farther from the town, the rope between them a fragile tether, holding together a wildness neither fully understood. She kicked the bucket with all the fury she had left. It crashed against the wooden floor, splashing cold water everywhere, soaking the dry dirt and sending flies buzzing up into the air. Her boots thudded heavily as she spun around, chest heaving, eyes wild with frustration and fear. The barn smelled thick, dust, dry hay, and something older, like memory itself, trapped in the timbers. The rope tugged at her wrist, coarse and tight, reminding her this wasn't freedom. She wanted out, to run from everything that clawed at her skin like a hunger she could never feed, to vanish from the dusty night and the silent, watchful stars. But the quiet man stood at the far corner, watching her with those steady, unreadable eyes. Not a word, just watching. He bent down and grabbed a loose plank by the barn door, steady hands working to fix what the years had worn away. His movements were slow, careful, the kind of calm that comes from carrying more weight inside than the world ever sees. She leaned back against a worn post, crossing her arms, lips twisted into a mocking grin. "Cow without horns," she said, voice sharp and bitter. Quiet as a grave. He glanced up, eyes meeting hers for a flicker of a moment. "Better a cow than a bull with no control," he said quietly. She snorted, bitter laughter dripping in her words. "You think quiet's the same as safe? You don't know what it's like to be hunted." He didn't answer. Instead, he straightened and motioned toward a narrow, creaky staircase leading to the loft above. "You sleep up there, away from the floor." She hesitated, staring up into the dark shadows. The steps looked thin, like they might collapse under the weight of secrets. Then she climbed, boots thudding heavy on each creaking plank. The loft was tight and dusty, the moonlight slipping through cracks in the boards, making stripes on the floor like prison bars. Her eyes caught something pinned to the far wall, a faded photograph in a cracked frame. A woman's face stared back. Kind eyes, tired smile, hair pulled back tight. The face was hauntingly familiar, like a ghost visiting her from another life. Who's she? Her voice cracked, small and uncertain, breaking the silence. From below, the man answered without looking up. Someone I lost. She frowned, stepping closer, fingertips brushing the glass carefully. Looks like she left you. He made no reply. The barn wrapped them in a silence thicker than the night outside. The air felt heavy with unspoken things, old pain, broken promises, things better left buried but refusing to stay dead. The girl sank onto an old bale of hay, her eyes glued to the photo long after his footsteps faded below. Her lips pressed tight, holding back words that wanted to spill free. Anger, fear, sorrow, tangled in knots she didn't know how to undo. The night stretched on, the barn creaking softly in the breeze. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the trees. Inside, two shadows, one restless, one steady, shared a fragile peace. Fragile as the rope around her wrist, she leaned against the rough wood, the rope digging into her skin like a reminder that safety came with a price. Her mind drifted back to the saloon, to the sheriff's grip, to the town's silent eyes watching, waiting. "Why'd you bring me here?" she finally whispered, voice low and rough. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, coat pulled tight against the cold. "Far from their eyes. They'll come looking." She swallowed, bitter. "They always come." He nodded slowly, tired eyes dark in the lantern light. "Then we'll be ready." The barn held its breath with them. The woman in the photo seemed to watch, silent and still, her eyes full of stories no one told aloud. She clenched her fists, the rope biting deep, but this time she didn't struggle. Not yet. Outside, the night deepened, stars blinking cold and distant. Somewhere far off, a dog howled, a lone sound carried on the wind. Inside the barn, the girl stared at the woman in the photo, lips pressed tight in a line that said more than words ever could. She was wild, untamed, broken, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand what it meant to be tied to something stronger than herself. The knock came hard, slamming against the barn door like a fist demanding entry. The quiet man froze, muscles tensing. His eyes flicked toward the door, sharp and calculating. Another knock followed, sharper this time, echoing in the still afternoon like a warning shot. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched thin between beats, heavy with threat. Then he moved, a slow, deliberate step toward the door. His boots hit the dirt floor softly, steady as a heartbeat. The barn smelled of dust and dry hay. The stale scent of old secrets pressed into the wood. His hand gripped the handle, cold and sure, pulling it open with no hesitation. Outside stood the sheriff, coat crisp, badge gleaming like a sunbeam cutting through the gloom. His eyes were hard, eyes that had seen too much and learned to wield fear like a weapon. The smile on his lips didn't reach his eyes. It was a grin made for cruelty, for control. "She belongs to the town court now," the sheriff said, voice low but full of menace. "That's the law. You're interfering." The man met him without blinking, calm, steady, a rock carved from silence. "I'm not hiding her." The sheriff spat on the ground, dust swirling around the spittle. "Lying suits you worse than that coat you wear. You think I don't know what you're doing. Protecting a wild girl won't save her, won't save you." "I don't lie," the man said, voice flat as stone. "She's not going anywhere." The sheriff stepped closer, boots crunching over gravel, eyes narrowing to slits. "You think you can protect her. You're just delaying what's coming. Wild blood runs fast, burns fast. You'd be wise to remember that." The quiet man's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "She's not like that. Women who don't learn pay the highest price." The sheriff warned, voice cold as a blade. "Don't think I've forgotten what her kind can do." The man's hand hovered near his belt, ready but not reaching. "She's different. Different enough to outrun the law? Don't fool yourself," the sheriff said, voice dropping to a whisper that carried like a threat. "She'll break or burn." Inside the barn, the girl crouched low behind a stack of hay bales. Her eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, every narrow window that let the sun slice through the dust. Her breath was steady, but her heart hammered loud in her chest. The rope still bit at her wrist, a rough reminder of the man's claim, but her mind was free. Sharp, wild, defiant. She caught every word, every sharp edge in the voices outside. Court. Hiding. Wild blood. Words meant to cage her, to strip her of whatever freedom she still clung to. They wanted her broken, silenced, folded back into the dirt from which the town grew. Her fists clenched tight, nails digging into palms. Her eyes darted toward the door, searching for any sign of weakness, any chance to slip away. The barn was old, creaking and whispering in the afternoon heat. Shadows pulled thick, a sanctuary woven from dust and silence. The quiet man stepped inside and shut the door behind him. His eyes found hers, steady and hard. "Stay in the barn," he said quietly. "Don't come out until I say." Her lips parted, voice barely a whisper, carrying more challenge than fear. "Not if they come for you first." Outside, the sheriff's boots crunched away, slow and deliberate. His threats hung in the air like smoke, bitter and choking. The door slammed shut, cutting off the outside world, leaving the two of them in a fragile truce, wrapped in silence and tension. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the man, the quiet man who wore dust-like armor, who carried secrets in his eyes. A man who protected, who waited, who refused to lose. The barn settled around them, the wood groaning softly as the sun dipped lower. Outside, the town whispered, watched, waited. Inside, a war was waging, silent, but no less fierce. The rope bit her wrist, the binding of her body, but her spirit refused to yield. She stared at the man, lips pressed tight, eyes blazing with fire. Not just a girl anymore, something harder, something wild. And she wasn't alone. He called her name once more, his voice low and rough, carrying through the heavy quiet before dawn. No answer. The rope lay coiled loosely on the barn floor, forgotten, slack, as if it had never held her at all. His boots pressed into the damp earth, following the faint, uneven tracks she left behind. Her footprints tangled in the grass, dragging lightly, desperate. A silent thread, pulling him away from the barn and into the cold night. The sky was a fading blanket of stars, just beginning to pale with the first hints of morning. The trail wound past broken fence posts and patches of thorny weeds, leading to the old stone well, half swallowed by wild grass and shadow. Its dark mouth yawned open like a secret, edged with cracked stones weathered by years of storms and silence. He stopped, heart tightening as he saw her there, bent over the rim, whispering to the water below like it was a friend who might answer back. Her breath was cold, soft, curling in little clouds against the chilly air, and her words fell like smoke, invisible but thick with weight. What's down there?" His voice broke the quiet, cautious but steady. She didn't turn to face him. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulder, eyes fixed on the black depths. "Everything they buried," she said, voice barely louder than the wind. He stepped closer, watching the water ripple with her faint movements. "We need to go," he said again, urgency sharpening his tone. She shook her head slowly, refusing to look away. "My mother's bones. They said she drowned in the river, but they didn't tell the truth. They threw her in here, hide her in the dark." Her voice cracked, the edges ragged with grief and something else, a bitter anger that burned beneath her skin. He swallowed hard, the words hitting him like a stone in his gut. "That's a story meant to keep you scared," he said, voice low but firm. She let out a bitter laugh, dry and broken. "It's the truth that haunts me. I can feel her beneath the surface, waiting." He knelt down beside her, eyes peering cautiously into the well. The water was cold and still, reflecting the moonlight like a silver mirror, holding secrets too heavy to speak. At first, all he saw was darkness, deep and endless. Then a faint glimmer caught his eye just beneath the surface, something pale and almost glowing against the black. A flash of white that made his heart skip. His hand shot out before she could lean farther, grabbing her arm with urgent strength. "Number you don't go in there." Her fingers curled around the rim of the stone, face inches from the water. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I have to. I need to know." He pulled her back, steady and strong, voice low and urgent. "Not like this, not alone." Her eyes burned with desperate wildness, flashing fiercely. "You don't understand. This isn't just about me. It's about what they did, what they buried to hide." He said nothing, holding her as the dawn began bleeding color into the sky, soft grays and pinks chasing the night away slowly. The old well sat between them, a dark wound in the earth, clutching its secrets tight as death. The grass stirred softly around them, whispering in the cold air. She looked up at him, voice breaking with fear and fury tangled tight. "If I don't face it, it'll swallow me whole." He nodded, rope forgotten in his hand, fingers loose but protective. "Then we face it together." The wind brushed against them like a ghost's breath, cold and fleeting. Behind them, the town still slept, unaware of the darkness creeping closer with every breath they took. She leaned back against the stones, shaking, eyes distant but fierce. "They said my mother was crazy," she said. "Said she talked to the well like it was alive. Said she was dangerous, that she was a wild thing, meant to be locked away or silenced." He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, steadying her trembling shoulders. They were afraid of what she knew. She swallowed hard, fists clenched tight in her lap. "And they're afraid of me too, because I'm the same." The morning light crept higher now, gilding the edges of the stones and turning the water to glass. The silence between them stretched thick, the weight of the past hanging heavy as the first birds began to call in the distance. "Tell me," he said finally, voice soft, "what did they bury? What did they want to hide?" She closed her eyes, voice barely a whisper. "Everything. The lies, the secrets. My mother knew things that could bring them down. She tried to tell, but no one listened. Instead, they drowned her in silence, buried her here, where no one would find her." He reached out, fingers tightening around hers. "Then we find the truth, together." Her eyes opened, fierce and wild once more. "They'll come for me," she said. "For us, if they know what we're doing." He shook his head, determination hardening his features. "Let them come." She leaned forward again, staring into the dark water, fingers trailing the smooth stone. Her voice was a low chant, broken and trembling. "Mother, if you're there, I'm coming for you." The water rippled faintly, a whisper in the dawn. His grip tightened on her wrist, pulling her back. "Enough." She struggled, trying to lean in, to reach the secrets hidden beneath the surface, but he yanked her away with urgent strength. "Not today," he said, breath heavy. "Not alone." She looked up at him, eyes wild but filled with a strange kind of trust. The rope was loose around her wrist again, but this time she didn't pull away. Together, they turned from the well, shadows stretching long behind them as the sun rose. The old stone well remained silent, guarding its secrets deep beneath the surface. But somewhere beneath the still water, the past stirred, waiting to be uncovered. The barn was dim, the firelight flickering weakly against the rough, cracked wood. Shadows stretched like fingers across the walls, dancing with every shift of the flame. She sat cross-legged on a threadbare blanket, hands trembling as she traced invisible patterns on her knees. The cold had seeped into the bones of the old barn, but the fire threw small circles of warmth between them. The silence was thick, almost choking, as if the night itself was waiting for her to speak. She exhaled slowly, her voice breaking the quiet like a fragile crack in glass. "The sheriff killed my mother." She swallowed hard, voice raw. "Call it justice." The words hung heavy in the air, dark and cold. The man shifted beside her, jaw tightening. His eyes, normally calm and steady, darkened with a shadow of pain he kept buried deep. "Why you?" he asked, voice low but sharp, cutting through the quiet. She looked up, eyes wild and haunted. "Because I'm her daughter." The words came fast, almost like a confession, but there was fire behind them, rage, grief, and something raw and unyielding. She began to tell him everything. The night they dragged her mother out into the streets. How no one in the town raised a hand to stop it. How the sheriff's grip was iron, his voice cold as winter, as he called it justice. "She wasn't crazy," the girl said bitterly. "They made her out to be. Said she talked to the wind, to the well, that she was dangerous." The man's jaw clenched tighter, as if he was swallowing memories that clawed at the edges of his mind. He knew what it meant to be silenced by fear, to have your truth twisted and buried. They carried her away like a beast, not a woman. No one said a word. No one dared. Her hands trembled, fists tightening against her knees. They wanted her gone. Now they want me. His gaze softened, pain and understanding flickering in the firelight. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. You've got the same eyes as the man in the photo. She looked up sharply, meeting his gaze. Her eyes held the wildness of a storm and the sorrow of a grave. I know, she whispered. The barn seemed to close around them, the air thick with history and hurt. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark like tiny ghosts. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not sure if I'm fighting for myself or for her. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight she carried. You're fighting for both. The night deepened, and the fire burned low. Outside, the world was still and cold. But inside the barn, two broken souls shared a fragile moment of peace, bound by blood, loss, and the promise of something more. The cold bit into their faces as hooves thundered against the dirt road, sending clouds of dust and dry leaves swirling in the pale moonlight. Each breath came out in frosty bursts, hanging briefly before fading into the heavy night air. The steady rhythm of the horse's footsteps was the only sound that broke the deep silence that had settled over the land. The man sat rigid in the saddle, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the trees lining the road. Beside him, the girl gripped the saddle horn, the coarse rope around her wrist pulling taut with every small movement. Her gaze was fixed on the dark horizon where the graveyard waited, a place filled with secrets, lies, and lost memories. They reached the edge of the graveyard, a forgotten stretch of earth surrounded by gnarled oak trees whose skeletal branches clawed at the sky like ancient fingers. The moon cast a weak glow over the cracked stones, casting their twisted shadows long and sinister across the ground. The girl slipped down from the horse with a quiet thud, landing lightly on the soft earth. She grabbed the lantern hanging from the saddle, the flickering flame inside barely pushing back the darkness. Her eyes scanned the rows of weathered headstones, some tilted askew, others broken or worn smooth by the merciless passage of time. Names were carved deep, but the letters had faded or crumbled in places, swallowed by moss and neglect. She moved slowly, lantern swinging in her trembling hand, light catching the faded inscriptions one by one. The weight of absence pressed heavily on her chest. No headstone bore her mother's name. They erased her, she said, voice barely a whisper, rough and broken. The man stepped close, his voice quiet but steady. Not from you. She met his eyes, dark and unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Together, they moved deeper into the graveyard, weaving through the narrow paths between the stones. The earth beneath their feet was soft and cold, the graveyard itself seeming to breathe beneath the moon's watchful gaze. Her hands trembled as she ran her fingers across the rough surface of a stone, hoping for a sign, a trace, a memory. But each stone only whispered more silence. He stopped suddenly, gaze fixed on a patch of fresh earth between two older graves. The dirt was loose and dark, clearly disturbed not long ago. No headstone marked this grave, no name carved into granite. Just earth, turned and raw, holding secrets the town wished buried. His eyes flicked upward toward the shadows at the tree line, narrowing with sudden awareness. A figure moved there, silent, still, watching. A man cloaked in black, standing just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. His wide-brimmed hat hid his face, a dark silhouette against the flickering glow. The tension stretched taut between them, unspoken but fierce. The girl swallowed, stepping forward despite the cold grip of fear in her chest. Her hands reached out and brushed the fresh dirt, feeling the loose soil crumble beneath her fingers. The weight of loss was heavy, the past bleeding through the night. This isn't over, she whispered, voice thick with sorrow and resolve. The man's gaze never left the shadowed figure watching from the trees. It's just beginning. The wind rustled the dry leaves at their feet, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay. The graveyard seemed to lean closer, as if holding its breath for the dark truths yet to be uncovered. She knelt beside the fresh grave, the lantern casting her face in a pale light. Her fingers dug into the earth, tracing invisible lines, mapping memories no one dared speak aloud. Her voice was low, almost a prayer. They tried to erase her, but I remember. The man crouched beside her, reaching out to rest a hand on her shoulder, steadying her trembling form. We'll find the truth, whatever it takes. Her eyes lifted to meet him, fierce and wild with a fire that refused to be snuffed out. "They'll come after us," she said, breath trembling. "They won't let this rest." He nodded, jaw set hard. "Let them try." The night stretched on around them, thick with secrets and shadows. The horses stirred in the distance, uneasy and restless. The silence was broken only by the soft rustling of branches and the whisper of the wind weaving through the trees. The girl looked back one last time at the unmarked grave. Her fingers lingered on the cold earth, a silent promise etched between soil and blood. "This isn't over." The man rose, casting one last glance toward the shadowed watcher. The quiet threat in that silhouette was a reminder. The past was never truly buried. It waited, hungry and patient, just beneath the surface. Together, they turned away from the graves, the lantern's flame flickering uncertainly as they walked back toward the horses. The night held them tight, but the fire in their hearts burned fierce. The road ahead was long, the darkness deep, and the fight was only just beginning. She waited until he was a shadow at the far fence, then went for the crate under feed sacks. The lid fought her. She pried it up. Dust rose. Bundles tied with faded twine lay inside. The first letter crackled. Thin, strict handwriting. The sheriff's hand. His name at the bottom made her mouth go dry. Money amounts. Meeting places. A bought witness. Another page named men with Sunday smiles and knives. Her mother's name slid through like a ghost. She slit another bundle. Threats written plain. "Hold your tongue. Remember the river. You won't be missed." Deputies, merchants, the pastor warned off a sermon, all signed with the same careful scrawl. That clean badge hand. Her chest hurt. A note dated the night her mother disappeared called it a domestic correction. She was asking for it. She ran at me. The ink bled where the pen pressed too hard. On the back, a paid list of watchers. Swallows fluttered in the rafters. She realized she had stopped breathing. The rope scar at her wrist tingled. A bundle with a once red ribbon held receipts. The undertaker paid. The grave digger paid after midnight. Use the old ground, leave the stone blank. Her mother's name, then scratched out. She pressed her palm to the floor to stop the shaking. He had kept this, kept it all. Rage rose fast. Hope rose with it. She stacked the letters by date, building a spine of proof. The barn door sighed. She snatched the top pages and turned. He stepped inside, dust on his coat, breath slow. His eyes went from her face to the papers and stayed. "You kept these?" she said. The words landed like a strike. "I was waiting," he said. "For what?" "For when you were ready to hold them." "You knew," she said. "You knew, and you left me tied to a saddle. I kept you breathing. That's all I am to you. Breathing? You're more than they wrote you to be." She stood, papers rustling like wings. "These letters say they paid for silence." "They did. They paid to bury my mother." "They did. And you have known for years." "I have." "Why keep them?" "To use them." His voice didn't lift. "I've been planning something for years." "What plan?" "A reckoning," he said. "Not a blaze that dies in a minute. A slow fire that takes the whole frame." "Why not go to the judge?" "The judge's name is in there." "The pastor?" "In there too." "The deputies?" "Paid, or scared, or both. So it's just us. For now. Us against a town that writes with knives." "You against them," he said. "Me beside you." "Beside me with what?" "With patience, with proof, with a plan no one sees until it's done." She glanced at a page. "There's a list here. I know it. Men who stood there when she begged. Yes. Men who watched while he called it justice. Yes. You wrote none of this?" "I wrote nothing. I collected what they wrote about themselves." She held a letter to the lantern. The paper glowed thin. "How long have you had them?" "Since the night I failed her," he said. Silence settled. The swallows clicked. The horse stamped once. "You knew my mother." "I did." "You loved her." He didn't answer. His jaw worked, then eased. "I let the town decide what she was. I won't make that mistake twice." "What now?" "We copy them," he said. "Hide the originals. Send pieces to men who hate each other so none knows who else knows. Mail one page to a paper 2 towns over. Put another under the church door. And the sheriff. We make him hurry," he said. "Men who hurry make mistakes." She folded one letter along the old crease and slipped it into her pocket. "He will come for us." "He already is." She turned back to the crate and pulled the bottom board loose. A false floor hid a metal tin. Inside lay 2 more bundles and a small iron key. She held it up. "What's this open?" "A box in the ground," he said. "If the barn burns, the box stays." "When do we start?" "Tonight." She gathered letters into her arms, twine trailing like veins. Their weight was heavier than any rope. When she looked up, his eyes were on her hands, then her face. "You sure?" he asked. "I'm done being erased," she said. He brought the lantern closer. She stood in its circle, holding the papers tight, shoulders set. The barn smelled like hay and old storms and the edge of change. "Then we move quietly," he said. "No speeches, no fire we can't put out." "If they want me quiet," she said, "they can learn to hear me rustle." Outside, wind combed the grass and rattled the loose plank in the door, a small warning tapping the rhythm of hurry. She pictured the sheriff's badge catching lamplight, his hand steady, his smile thin. She pictured the men on that list, boots on fresh dirt, pockets full of hush. Her knuckles whitened around the papers. Fear moved through her, but purpose moved faster, sharper, clean, and cold. She lifted the stack to her chest and felt. Her heartbeat pressed the sheets. The sheriff's hand lay against her skin like a brand, but it was hers now. She held the letters like a weapon. The sheriff's horse stood broad and still across the narrow road, blocking the way forward. Its breath steamed in the cold air, ears flicking back at the sound of approaching hooves. The sheriff sat high in the saddle, hat low, his hand steady on the revolver pointed squarely at the quiet man. But his eyes weren't on him. They were locked on her. The rope from the saddle horn to her wrist pulled taut as their own horse slowed to a stop. She could feel the weight of the sheriff's stare like a brand on her skin. His mouth curled into something that might have been a smile, but it held no warmth. "Come here," he said, his voice flat, the command carrying across the space between them. She didn't blink. "I'd rather hang." The sheriff's expression barely shifted, but the hand holding the gun adjusted slightly, like he was considering which one of them to shoot first. The quiet man kept his gaze on the sheriff, his own hand low near his belt, fingers resting close to his holster but not yet moving. The rope between them swayed lightly in the breeze, a thin tether that could pull her forward or keep her back. The sheriff's horse shifted, stamping once on the packed dirt. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "You think this is hard," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the cold. "You haven't seen hard." The quiet man's tone was calm. "What's this about?" "You know damn well what it's about," the sheriff replied. "She's wanted in town. The court's ready. Sentence waiting." "For what?" the man asked. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "For what she is." The girl laughed, bitter and quick. "And what am I, Sheriff?" "Say it." His gaze flicked to her briefly, then back to the man. "A danger." "Only to men like you," she said. The quiet man leaned forward slightly in the saddle. "If you were so sure of your law, you wouldn't be waiting for us out here." "I'm here because I knew you'd run," the sheriff said. "And because I don't trust the walls in town to hold what doesn't want to be held." The girl tugged against the rope, testing it. The man didn't move. The sheriff's eyes caught the motion, but he didn't comment, just shifted his gun a fraction toward her. "You could make this easy," the sheriff said. "I'm not in the habit," she answered. "You're in the habit of trouble. That's because trouble's in the habit of finding me." The quiet man spoke evenly. "Put the gun down." "Not while she's breathing," the sheriff said. The man's voice hardened. "You'd have to go through me first." "That's the idea." The air between them went still, the only sound the creak of saddle leather and the distant caw of a crow. The girl's heart thudded against her ribs. The sheriff's finger brushed the trigger. The quiet man's eyes didn't leave his. She could feel the pull of the rope, her hand tightening around it, a sudden thought flashing. If she yanked hard enough, maybe she could throw the sheriff's aim off. But the man beside her shifted slightly, a silent warning to stay still. "Are you going to try?" the sheriff asked. "Not yet," the man replied. "You think you can walk away from this?" "I think you've already made your mistake." The sheriff tilted his head, studying him. "And what mistake's that?" The quiet man's eyes narrowed. Pointing that gun without pulling the trigger. The sheriff's jaw worked. "Last chance." The girl's voice cut in before the man could answer. "If you want me, you'll have to drag me, same as you did my mother, and we both know how that ended." For the first time, the sheriff's expression cracked, a flicker of something dark moving behind his eyes. His grip tightened on the revolver. The quiet man's voice was steady. "You shoot me. She runs. You take her now. You answer for what you've buried." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough." The wind picked up, rustling the dry grass at the roadside. The sheriff's horse shifted again, muscles tense, sensing the coiled energy between the three of them. The girl's breathing slowed, her eyes locked on the sheriff's hand. The man in the saddle beside her spoke, voice low but carrying. "You're gonna wish you'd shot me now." Dust exploded around them as hooves tore the ground apart, the sound of gunfire cracking sharp in the cold air. The sheriff's shot went wide, shattering a chunk of rock by the road. The quiet man fired once in return, not to kill, but to break the sheriff's aim. The next moment, the sheriff's horse reared, sending him crashing to the dirt. The man winced, his own shoulder grazed by a bullet, blood soaking into the fabric of his coat. He kept his eyes locked on the figure sprawled in the dust, the gun knocked from the sheriff's grip and lying just out of reach. The girl slid from the saddle, boots hitting the ground hard. She strode forward, breathing fast, rope swinging from her wrist like a reminder of every mile she'd been pulled along. She stopped over the sheriff, eyes hard, jaw set. "Finish it," she said. The man stepped down, his breath heavy but measured. "That's not me." She bent, fingers brushing the revolver in the dirt. "Then it'll be me." His voice sharpened. "No." She picked up the gun. It felt heavy, alive in her hands. The sheriff groaned, rolling to his side, his eyes flicking between her face and the weapon. "You think you scare me?" he rasped, dust sticking to the sweat on his skin. Her grip tightened. "I don't need to scare you. I just need to stop you breathing." The quiet man stepped closer, his own blood dripping down his arm. "You pull that trigger, you can't go back." She didn't look at him. "There's nothing to go back to." The sheriff tried to push himself up, his hand reaching for the dirt, like he could claw his way out of this. She lifted the gun higher, both hands shaking now. "Think about it," the man said. "Think about what comes after." Her voice cracked, but didn't soften. "After is the part I've been waiting for." The sheriff's breathing grew faster, but his eyes held the same cold authority. "You ain't got the stomach." Her lips curled. "You don't know what I've got." The quiet man stepped right into her line, close enough to touch. "Don't let him make you into what he already says you are." She swallowed hard, jaw trembling. "And if I let him live, he'll keep coming." "Maybe," the man said, "but not today. Not like this." Her finger brushed the trigger, the weight of the choice pressing on her like the heat of the sun. The wind picked up, carrying dust into her eyes. She blinked, tears mixing with grit, her breath shuddering. The sheriff's smirk returned, thin but defiant. "Do it. Prove me right." Her eyes burned as she steadied her aim. The quiet man's hand shot out, clamping around her wrist before she could pull the trigger. The force of his grip stopped her cold, the gun still heavy between them. Dawn found the town holding its breath. As they rode the main street, faces gathered on porches and behind curtains, eyes tracking the pair. The girl kept one hand on the saddle horn and the other on the bundle of letters. Blood dried on the man's sleeve. Dust layered both of them. No one spoke. They did not slow. The quiet man's jaw was set, his gaze fixed ahead. She sat straight, chin lifted, the rope looped at her wrist dark with sweat. The words in those envelopes thudded with the horse's rhythm. The town's silence traveled with them, a hush before a storm. The courthouse rose at the end of the street, peeling paint, bowed steps, windows that had watched too much. She slid down first, boots thudding on the boards. He dismounted and touched his wounded shoulder once. They climbed together. "You're gonna tell them," he said. "And you'll stand with me?" "Always." They pushed the door. Cool air, paper dust, the whisper of pens stopping. A clerk's mouth opened and closed. A deputy near the wall straightened, hand falling from the telegraph. Somewhere down the hall, someone said the sheriff's name and swallowed it. Their footfalls carried down the corridor. Envelopes rasped softly under the twine. The man opened the chamber door. The sheriff entered from the side with two deputies in his arms. No cuffs, but close. His hat was gone. Scrape on his cheek. Shirt torn where dust and blood had argued and both won. He saw her, then the bundle, and his eyes flattened. "You think paper will save you," he said. "It'll sink you," she said. The judge lifted his head from behind the bench. The room, tired from years of small arguments dressed as law, felt wider. The man tipped his chin. "Keep walking." "I'm walking," she said. They crossed the floor. She felt the town press against the walls outside. On the benches, merchants and farmers straightened slowly. The judge studied them, robe neat, eyes tired. "What brings you here at this hour?" "Truth," the man said. "Stories," the sheriff said. "Letters," the girl said. "Whose?" the judge asked. "The sheriff's," she said. "And the men who ride with him." A stir moved across the benches. The deputies glanced at each other and kept their hands where all could see. The judge tapped a pen. "If you have allegations, they must be sworn." "They're sworn already," the man said. "Signed in ink by the men who made them." "This is nonsense," the sheriff snapped. "Is it?" the girl said. "I can read you the night my mother was corrected and the coin that shut the undertaker's mouth." A clerk took a step and stopped. A woman near the back covered her lips. The judge's eyes slid to the sheriff. "You'll remain silent." He looked back at her. "Evidence is presented properly." "Properly is how they erased her," the girl said. "Properly is how they paid men to watch. I brought paper because paper is how they pretend it's clean." "We didn't come for speeches," the man said. "No," she said. "We came so these words can stand where she couldn't." The sheriff twisted in the deputy's grip. "Judge, this stunt will split the town. She's disturbed." "Disturbance is what happens when truth gets loose," the man said. "Order," the judge said, very firm. The room seemed to shift. The girl stepped closer to the bench. The sheriff's eyes tracked her like a bead on a rifle. "You're shaking," he said. She looked at her hands. He was right. She raised her chin. "I'm still holding." "One step more," the man murmured. She moved that one step. The bench loomed. The judge waited, pen stilled, eyes on her face. She felt like a door was before her, and behind it, a house with all its windows open. "We ride in peace today," the man said, voice for the judge but meant for the room. "But we ride with names." "I will see what you intend to submit," the judge said. The sheriff leaned forward. "Judge, you let this go on and you won't have a town left to sit in." "Maybe the town that's left will be worth sitting in," she said. A murmur rose and settled. The deputies eased the sheriff back a pace. Boots scuffed. Dust drifted in a sunbar across the floorboards. The clock marked the moment. The man shifted off the hurt shoulder and stood taller. "What happens next is on record." The judge nodded once, not to them, but to the desk. "Place it." Her fingers tightened around the bundle. She thought of the well, the unmarked ground, the photograph in the loft, the rope on the barn floor. The town had written her mother out. Ink would write her back in. "Do it," the man said, voice softened. She stepped the last distance, steady now. The sheriff tried to catch her eyes. She did not give him that. She gave the judge her steps, the room, her breath, the paper, her hands. At the desk, she stopped. For a heartbeat, she held on, feeling the crinkle and weight. The proof warmed by her ride. Around her, the room waited. She lifted the bundle chest high, then lowered it to the polished surface. She placed the letters on the judge's desk. The rope was still warm from her skin. She gripped it at the knot, fingers firm and pulled. The loops loosened with a dry rasp, the fibers scratching her palm as they fell apart. It slipped free from her wrist in one long coil, landing in the dirt between them. The faint red mark it left glowed against her skin like the last word of an argument that had gone on too long. She didn't rub at it. She wanted it to show, for now. Her eyes stayed on him as she let the rope drop. "I'm not running," she said. His answer came quickly, without a pause. "Good. I'm not holding you." Something in the air changed, less tight, but not light. She bent, lifted the rope, and walked toward the barn without waiting for him to follow. Her boots crunched softly over the gravel, each step slow but certain. The barn's doors groaned as she pushed them open. Inside, the light was thin, spilling through the gaps in the boards in narrow stripes. It smelled of hay, leather, and the faint trace of smoke from nights when they'd kept the lantern burning too long. She walked past the stalls, past the workbench, straight to the back wall where a single iron hook jutted from the wood. That hook had held the rope before it ever touched her wrist. She set the coil onto it, the weight of it pulling the hook down with a creak. It hung there limp, not a weapon, not a tether, just rope again. For a moment she stood still, her eyes drifting upward to the loft. The photograph was still there, tucked into a wooden beam, edges curled from years in the same place. The woman in the picture stared out, kind eyes shadowed by a sad, knowing smile. She climbed the steps slowly, each creak of the wood sounding louder in the quiet. At the top, she stepped close, leaning in until her own reflection faintly merged with the woman's face in the glass. The first time she'd seen it, her stomach had twisted. Now, she just looked, and for the first time, her lips lifted in the smallest of smiles. Not for him, not for the woman in the frame, for herself. A sound broke through the quiet, metal scraping against wood from outside. She turned, coming back down the steps. Through the crack in the barn door, she saw the flicker of firelight. She stepped outside. He was there in the yard, crouched low over a small fire he'd built in the dirt. The flames were steady, bright against the pale morning light. In his hand, he held something that caught the glow, a round shape gleaming faintly in the firelight. The sheriff's badge. He didn't explain. He just held it out to her, palm open. She took it slowly, the cool metal pressing into her skin. She turned it over in her fingers, the edges worn smooth, the surface scratched. It was lighter than she'd expected, but heavier than it should have been. Like every lie and order it had been used for had soaked into the metal. Her thumb rubbed across the engraving. For a second, she saw the sheriff's face in her mind, the way he'd looked at her that first night, the way his grip had felt on her arm. She saw her mother's name in the letters they'd found. She heard the well's dark silence. She felt the rope tighten around her wrist again, phantom and sharp. Her fingers tightened around the badge. "You kept this?" she asked. He gave a short nod. "Took it off him myself. You could have tossed it right then." "I wanted you to." She looked at him, searching his face for anything else, but his eyes were steady, unreadable as always. She glanced down at the fire, the orange tips licking at the morning air. "Feels too easy burning it." "Some things you bury," he said. "Some things you burn." She held the badge over the flames. The heat licked her knuckles. For a moment she thought about keeping it, about holding on to it the way he'd kept the letters. Proof. Wait. But proof of what? That the sheriff had ever worn it? She didn't need proof. She had memory, and memory burned hotter. She opened her fingers. The badge fell into the fire, landing with a dull clink against the embers. The metal hissed, a sharp sound as the heat began to warp it. Flames curled over it, eating away the shine. The sheriff's name and rank dulled first, then disappeared under black. They stood there, side by side, watching it change. The fire's heat washed over their faces, the morning breeze cool against their backs. Neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of metal and the soft crackle of burning wood. She didn't look away until the badge had sunk deep into the coals, unrecognizable. "Feels lighter," she said quietly. "That's how you know it's done," he replied. She glanced at him. "And what now?" "We keep moving," he said. "Different kinds of roads. Still together. Always." The fire popped. A curl of smoke rose and drifted over the yard. She thought of the rope hanging on its hook inside the barn, of the photograph in the loft, of the unmarked grave, and the man in black watching from the trees. She knew none of it was finished, but the rope wasn't on her wrist, and the badge was gone. She took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill her lungs. The fire burned steadily. The day stretched out ahead of them, unmarked. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was being pulled. She felt like she was walking on her own. They turned from the fire together, their shadows long in the new light, the smell of smoke clinging to them like a promise. "Leave it," a voice said from the road. She turned first. He had already squared to the sound. The fire popped, the burned badge settling deeper in the coals. A man stepped from the hedgerow, the same black coat, the same stillness. His hat hid most of his face, not the pale scar at the mouth. He looked at their hands, then at the fire. "You think ash ends a thing," he said. "It ends the part that wore metal," she said. "Metal is a habit. Habits move hosts." The quiet man didn't advance. "You've been watching since the graves." "I watch who digs." The man in black said, "You two like to dig." "And you like to bury," she said. He smiled without warmth. "Judge wants you by noon. Paper makes noise." "Paper makes proof," she said. "Paper makes firewood." "Tell the judge we're coming," the man said. "I just did," the watcher said, and slid into the trees. She exhaled. "He's theirs." "He's the town's fear with boots on," the man said. "And we still go?" "We go." She glanced at the rope on the hook. "Not like before." "No," he said. "Not like before." They packed fast. She slid letters into a satchel, splitting bundles, one on her, one on him, one under the saddle. He rewrapped his shoulder, fresh red blooming through cloth. "Are you sure you can hold the reins?" she said. "I can hold you if I have to." "You don't," she said. They mounted. Wind dragged a thread of smoke after them. She didn't look back. The town rose quiet and taut. Doors cracked. Eyes counted. She kept the satchel tight to her ribs. He rode close enough to touch, but didn't. At the courthouse, a deputy waited, hat crushed in both hands. He stared at the bandage, then the satchel. "You carry a kindling." "Kindling burns up," she said. "This doesn't." It was colder inside than in the morning. The judge sat higher. The clerk stacked forms. "Where is he?" she asked. "Infirmary," the judge said. "You brought a fight to my road." "Your road had it coming," the man said. "You said you had letters," the judge said. She opened the satchel but kept a hand on the bundle. "You know these names. You take Sunday dinner with them." "Allegations are not convictions," he said. "Signatures are not wind," she said. He nodded to the clerk. "Read one." She didn't hand it over. She read. "Undertaker paid for silence. Gravedigger paid for midnight work. The sheriff confirms removal. No stone. Amount noted." She turned a page. "Threats to the pastor, raises to deputies after a spectacle." My mother's name crossed out. The judge watched her mouth more than the paper. "What do you want?" "Records," she said. "Light." "Those are prices," he said. "They're the only ones I take." The man laid 3 pages on the desk. "Duplicates. Half the town wakes with one next week. The rest read a freight line paper after that. We don't need this room to be brave, but it can be first." "And if I refuse?" the judge said. "Then you'll see your own name in print," she said. Slow. The clerk's pen scratched, then stopped. A back door opened. The man in black slipped inside and leaned on the wall, saying nothing, threatening enough. The judge saw him and looked away. "You'll leave copies." "We'll leave sparks," the man said. "And you," the judge said to her. "We'll swear." "On my mother's grave," she said. "When it gets a stone." Something in the judge's face bent. He gestured to a deputy. "Fetch a Bible." "No," she said. "Fetch a spade." A ripple moved through the room. "We will not turn this place into a yard," the judge said. "It already was," she said. "You just kept the grass trimmed." The man touched her elbow. "One step at a time." She breathed through the heat, nodded once, and set 3 letters on the judge's desk. The sound was small and final. When they turned to go, the man in black pushed off the wall. "You walk out of here without an escort." "We rode in without one," she said. He opened the door and stood aside. "Ride careful." Outside, the porch boards thudded under their boots. The town had crept closer, the circle of faces tighter. Their horse blew and shook its mane. She looked at the people she knew by how they looked away. "We won't stop," she said, not loud, but it carried. An old woman on a bench lifted her chin. "Don't. We're tired of burying the wrong ones." The girl's throat tightened. The man put a hand on the pommel and waited for her to mount first. For once, she didn't need a hand. They swung into the street. The sun had climbed. Shadows shortened. Somewhere a hammer struck a nail, steady, like a stone finding its name. She didn't look for rope on her wrist. It wasn't there. "Where to?" and he asked. "Home," she said. "We build one." "And after?" "After we dig." He nodded. "More shovels." "And more paper," she said. "And more fire." They rode past the well road without turning. Not today. Today was ash and ink. Tomorrow could be bones. Behind them, courthouse doors opened and shut, and the town breathed out like it had been holding it for years.